This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we learned that woke is alive and well, but there's a big asterisk involved. We talked to Mary Morgan, the co-host of Pop Culture Crisis, a great look at Hollywood that's fresh, funny, and always provocative. And we explained why Meg 2: The Trench is the best and often the worst movie of the summer, all in one.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Before we begin, I hope you'll subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, and while I'm being bold, maybe you'll subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Every new Hitcast episode is there, plus in the next few weeks we'll be adding new, fresh, original videos too. Lights, camera, Toto. Where's my makeup? You know, I wrote the book on woke Hollywood literally, almost 2 years ago. But I had one major dream when I was writing the book. I didn't expect to be famous, didn't expect to have so much money I could retire. I wanted woke to retire. I wanted it to be passé by the time the book hit the newsstands. And as you know, when you write a book, it takes a little while before you finish it, and then, of course, it actually reaches the public. And spoiler alert, that didn't happen. But we have seen some progress in the war on woke. I mean, Dave Chappelle and Joe Rogan survived significant, serious, extended cancel culture attacks. And of course, Bud Light went woke and, well, you know how that story went. But we also saw J.K. Rowling get canceled again recently, and then stars like Jamie Foxx had to apologize for basically doing nothing wrong. The case of Neo, though, is probably the most fascinating. The singer shared his worries that some parents are transitioning their kids way too soon these days, and you shouldn't listen to your 5-year-old boy if he says he wants to be a she. He's right, of course. It's too soon for life-altering decisions from a 5-year-old. They're too young. It's just common sense. But Neo, of course, got shredded on social media for his comments. You know, it's the way things go. So he uncorked an apology in record time. I think it broke a land speed record. Except he later claimed that his publicist wrote the apology. Here's what he had to say about the matter afterwards.
First and foremost, I do not apologize for having an opinion on this matter. I am a 43-year-old heterosexual man raising 5 boys and 2 girls, okay? That's my reality. Now, if my opinion offended somebody, yeah, sure, I apologize for you being offended because that wasn't my intention. My intention is never to offend anybody. However, I'm entitled to feel how I feel. I'm absolutely entitled to feel how I feel the same way you are entitled to feel how you feel. I ain't asked nobody to follow me. I ain't asked nobody to agree with me. I was asked a question and I answered the damn question, okay?
It's a fascinating response at a lot of levels, and as of this taping, that fake apology is still up on his Twitter account, his X account, but still, I think what he had to say was fascinating. And I think it also captures what an odd cultural space we're in right now. But I will say that woke is still here, it's still around, but sometimes you can sense it's backing up, it's on its heels. And thank goodness for that. Growing older does have its perks. Not a lot of them. Aches and pains are no fun, but there are some perks involved. You live through a lot of different news cycles. You get a sense of the next one coming around the corner. You watch so many TV shows and movies. You can spot cultural trends and also connect the dots far better than Gen Z types that just haven't lived life enough to make those connections. Except our next guest is as wise as a Gen Xer, but she's firmly in the Gen Z camp. She's Mary Morgan, very smart lady who co-hosts Pop Culture Crisis. The Daily Show breaks down the latest Hollywood news. It skewers virtue-signaling stars. How wonderful is that? And to bring some common sense to an industry that could use a lot more of it. I had the pleasure of actually appearing on Pop Culture Crisis a few months ago, and spoiler alert, I'm heading back there pretty soon. So I thought it's the perfect time to have Mary on this show and get her thoughts on the Hollywood strike, the ongoing battles for free speech, and so much more. Now, if you don't know Mary yet, I think you're going to subscribe to Pop Culture Crisis as soon as you hear our conversation. Trust me. Mary, thanks for joining the show. Now, you've had a lot of cool guests on Pop Culture Crisis, present company excluded, of course. But who stands out to you? Someone who changed your mind, surprised you, was intriguing, or just really had an essential grasp of pop culture? Because that's not easy.
This is a super difficult question, partly because I have let all of the shows kind of blur together in my mind, but also because I genuinely enjoy our guests so much. Um, Recently, we had on Xavier DeRusso and CJ Pearson from PragerU,
Hmm.
and I just loved having that like energy in the room. They like as a duo, they're amazing, but individually too, they're great. I aspire to be as articulate on culture as they are, and they're also just so funny.
Hmm.
Another guest that we had where it kind of felt like a full circle moment for me personally was Blair White, because I like had pulled up this photo of us when I was like 16, meeting Blair White at Tyson's Corner Mall in Virginia, at like some fan meet and greet, and then there we were on the show, and then Lauren Southern too. Like these people that I looked up to when I was in high school, I got to talk to them about our culture
Yeah.
and hear their thoughts on it and just like laugh and have fun. So I never would have expected that. Never would have predicted that would happen in a million years.
And it sounds like they didn't disappoint, which is also very important too. Sometimes they say
Oh, of
don't
course
meet your
not. Yeah.
heroes, but in this case, it worked
But
out
like
well.
I usually enjoy meeting my heroes. So I mean, I'm not saying YouTubers are my heroes, but like I definitely looked up to them when I
Mhm.
was a wee teenager.
Sure, sure. Now, your show gives you constant contact with the audience. That's pretty typical for the digital age. And of course, your fans aren't shy. They will just weigh in on everything. What is that teaching you
Yes.
about what people really want in entertainment? And is it different than what the media is giving them at this point?
Well, specifically when we interact with the audience on the show, if they super chat anything $20 and over, they interrupt our conversation. We have to read it immediately, right then and there. And that means they get to put in their feedback on anything we're talking about or disagree with us.
Sure.
And there is something to be said for that. Like, you don't get to do that when you're just listening to traditional media or you're listening to the news, bigger outlets, stuff like that. That's, I think, why streamers are kind of taking over. I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, but this Twitch streamer who's 21 years old named Kai Sinat, he announced a fan meet and greet kind of giveaway thing for his fans and 2 days before. And then in New York City, thousands of these kids show up. Like, I guess it's their summer break from school, so they have the free time to do this. But their parents are literally taking them to this thing, and it breaks out into a riot. And I think, this in the past probably would have hurt someone's reputation,
Hmm.
but it actually it's giving him more clout. It's making him seem more cool because it shows that his internet influence isn't just numbers on a screen. He can actually get people to come out to a real life event. And as much as that can break out into chaos and turn into a dangerous situation, I mean, 66 people got arrested, there were injuries, all sorts of things. It shows the power of having a social media following
Yeah.
instead of being propped up artificially by a Hollywood studio or something like that. No one actually cares about these celebrity interviews. They really don't. And I watch the interviews when we're researching to talk about these things on the show. Nobody is watching them. It's
Yeah.
just
And nobody's touched by them
that,
either.
that these publications pick up for headlines that recycle and copy and paste for months.
Hmm.
No one actually cares.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So I really appreciate that we get to talk with our audience directly.
well, to quote Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. How do you process that when you know you've got this influence on fans, or at least this connection? Yeah, I imagine you can't take that lightly.
I don't. I kind of have a built-in understanding of the way that these internet parasocial relationships work because I've been intensely chronically online since I was a kid. I had my first smartphone when I was like 11 years old, and I was watching YouTubers from that point on, probably earlier too. And I like to keep a healthy distance. I generally don't respond to like direct messages. I mean, there's also a part of that that's just being a woman on the internet means you have to have a healthy distance between you and the people who follow you
Absolutely.
just for safety reasons alone. But um I never want that to come off as like I'm above it all or like I'm aloof to my audience. Like, and it's so weird to even talk about it like that because I don't feel like I have as much influence as I do. And I just kind of plunged into this with no prior experience literally last year. Um, so I guess I'm still learning how to do it, but I don't want to have like audience capture.
Hmm.
Brett told me about this. He taught me about this. My co-host, he said like if your audience expects a certain shtick from you, you can kind of become captive to that, and you only give them what they expect. So I if I have a contrarian opinion that I think isn't going to be popular on the show or anywhere else, I actually try to lean into that
Hmm.
because I don't want to just say the scripted lines and have the boilerplate takes. I want to have like genuine opinions and actually stick up for them, even if my own audience doesn't agree with me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why people are flocking to shows that may be based on YouTube as opposed to the broadcast channels, because that raw sense, that integrity does matter, and the people are hungry for that. The Hollywood strike is raging on, or guess I should say the two Hollywood strikes are raging on. Any thoughts on whether? I mean, no one can predict when they'll be settled, but do you think that the industry will be different when the smoke settles? I mean, what's in the horizon here? Because it feels significant. It feels like there's something shifting, and it's hard for me to kind of put my finger on it. But what's your sense of where things will eventually shake out?
It seems like these strikes are just going to be going on indefinitely at this point. I could be proven wrong in a week and they'd be over and they get the negotiations they want. I don't expect that though. But I just think that this is giving a huge opening for independent productions to take over and get more major mainstream traction that maybe they didn't have before. And like independent filmmakers and smaller studios have a special opportunity right now. So I want to watch the big theatrical blockbusters, but if for the time being we're not going to get those, um, I also want to give smaller productions a chance too.
Yeah.
And another trend that's getting accelerated by the strikes is it's also getting accelerated by our own morbid curiosity about its potential, but artificial intelligence. Like we're only just beginning to see what AI can generate in entertainment. Whether or not that should be called art is not up to me to say. But what I do know is that it's just so idiotic for these actors and writers to say basically, oh, the studios have found a cheap and effective replacement for our already mediocre work. This seems like a great time to go on strike.
That's
Like,
right.
you're making your replacement happen even faster than it would have. So, despite my suspicions and misgivings about AI and the fact that it's already being used for evil, I think it's the enemy of my enemy and therefore my friend in that sense.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah, no, I get it. And I also think it's moving so fast. It's really hard to even, capture what it is and what it will be in a year or two. That's the most frightening aspect. One of the things that strikes me about what you do on the show and about some others as well, but you rail against woke, and I do that too. But it's not from a left or right perspective. I'm openly conservative. That's where I approach things. I make it abundantly clear. But I feel like people like yourself are not ideological, and yet you often sound like me or rail against some of the things I do. How is this crossing those ideological boundaries at this point? Because that intrigues me to no end.
Well, I don't want to rail against wokeness for the sake of it. And I don't
Hmm.
want to be one of those people that says, like, get woke, go broke, etc. When that's not really in practice how it works. I don't think that Disney is necessarily losing money because their movies are woke. I think it's just because their products are descending in quality and people are less interested in them.
Hmm.
And like any human story is an anti-woke story. Like but when it's made specifically to be anti-woke or appeal to an anti-woke audience, you can sniff that out from a mile away. And that doesn't come off as genuine either.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of willing to criticize from either end of the spectrum. And there was a lot of debate about the Barbie movie specifically.
Oh, I haven't heard about that. Is that coming out soon?
Yeah. I know that we went over your review on the show too, because you hated the movie from what I can tell. And it was woke, but I won't sit here and say I didn't like enjoy a lot of that movie.
And I
There were
enjoyed
a
the
lot
beginning.
of parts that I found it really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Before like the final act where, America Ferrera's speech happens and then the rest of the movie just kind of takes itself way too seriously.
Yeah.
Before that, I really found it enjoyable and funny in a lot of ways.
I did too, by the way.
So
I thought it started very strong and then it just got weaker as it went along.
yeah, I just can tell like that movie had so much potential to be like something like a Legally Blonde,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was kind of crippled by that messaging in there, and it didn't seem like they really knew what they wanted to do with it. They were very confused. The movie was confused about itself.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And that's what's off-putting.
Yeah.
So like nothing is completely woke or completely anti-woke. I guess it's hard to articulate it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think also once you start labeling things, it gets a little sticky because things can be woke and
Yeah.
entertaining, and things could be message free and be terrible too. So it gets, and I think also
Right.
there is a sense on a cultural perspective that we're using the word woke too much, too aggressively, too much as a blanket statement. And I think there is a very specific purpose behind it. And I think that kind of muddying the waters doesn't really do anyone good. And then we say, oh, you just say woke because you don't like it. It's like a catch-all. But one thing that I do think matters when we talk about woke and talk about cancel culture is celebrities apologizing, backpedaling, and I know that just it's celebrities who cares, but that bleeds into the culture where all of a sudden it's the gal down the street who has to apologize because she said something on Twitter that her bosses found offensive when it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you
I was
think?
going off about
Yeah.
this yesterday. I was saying like celebrities can't really get canceled in any meaningful way because they have a platform that's astroturfed in a lot of ways. I mean, Lizzo, people are saying, "Oh, Lizzo is getting canceled. She's getting canceled." That's not that's not the case, because for celebrities it's a flash in the pan. If they're getting criticized for something, if they're getting backlash for anything they do publicly, they'll say, "Oh, I'm getting canceled." It's sort of like flattering yourself to even call it that.
Mm-hmm.
When ordinary people get canceled, just like you said, the stakes are just so much higher for them, and they can lose their jobs, they can get expelled from their schools, they can get their families harassed for years on end, and the only thing that comes up when someone Google searches your name is what you were canceled for. Celebrities, it's just not the same. It's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, but I also think once they backpedal, it sends a cultural signal. Oh, they're rich, they're famous, they're beautiful. If they can't stand up to this, then I've got to buckle right away because I'm gonna be eaten alive. I think that's one of my bigger
True.
concerns about it as well. But and we see people sometimes they stand up. J.K. Rowling just will not back down, and yet others will buckle. In a New York minute. So I think we see two steps forward, one step back. But that's just where we are right now. One of the things that you are, I would say, obsessed about, I think in the very healthiest ways, is free speech, and I am too. I can't stop talking about it, and I fear for its survival. How do we make the difference with people? I think if you're a pop culture crisis fan, you're on board. You're more pro free speech than most people. But a lot of Gen Z types aren't. And you see it in a lot of polling. You see it in a lot of university assessments that, it's okay to ban hate speech. It's okay to kick people off campus. How do we crack them? How do we change that attitude amongst young people? You're young. You can't speak for everyone, obviously. That's wildly unfair. But how do we get that message out that, boy, if you cancel this today, tomorrow it's going to get much worse?
My take on free speech is complicated, and I'm not yet able to fully articulate it. I think it's a noble value, but I think that this country has enjoyed the very closest we can get to real freedom of speech. And it still has been a struggle the entire time to ensure that everyone enjoys that right equally. And there are political prisoners in this country. It doesn't get more cut and dry than that. So I guess what I mean to say is that free speech sounds great on paper, but in practice, it seems like we've shown that we're not capable of handling it or using it responsibly or enforcing it equally for everyone. So it makes me question the endeavor altogether. But I guess that's not really a popular take. It's not a popular take on pop culture crisis. I've said that on the show.
Yeah.
In so many ways, and people push back on that because it's like, oh, sunlight is the best disinfectant, whatever. But I just see like free speech is a good thing, trying to replicate this freedom that we were. I'm religious, so I think that, you know, this was given to us by God, and no man, no government can take it away from us. But in practice, it looks like, you know, we haven't shown ourselves capable of actually
Make it real.
I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't make it sound like I'm anti-free speech. I do think it's a good thing, but we're not showing that we're capable of handling it.
Well, I mean, I think you could say that's like the American experiment. It is noble, it is wonderful, it is amazing on paper, and yet we've spent 250 odd years struggling to make it as perfect as it appears on the page, and we don't quite get there. Obviously, slavery and there are injustices in the country, but I also think that we should be ever striving for it. And I would say the same for free speech, where we do stumble and bumble. It is thorny. Issues come up across the board, but it's something that we should always be striving for. And I just think there's a movement now that is not even questioning or cynical or curious like you are, but aggressively anti. That it's seemingly okay.
Yes.
With the, it's, conservatives got banned on social media. Well, that's perfectly fine because they're hurting the country. Or, this information about COVID, well, that was going to hurt the country. Well, that's not really how it works. And obviously we've been proven what's the fallout from that. So yeah, it is thorny, but I think more conversations are better than less. And I think, even someone like yourself who's questioning things and sees a downside, I mean, I think that's healthy as well. I mean, I'd rather err in that direction than go.
Like, even the way that Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it is going with like starting shows on the platform. Like Roseanne Barr is about to have her own show. I have no idea what that's going to look like. Even on Twitter, you're not allowed to freely express yourself. Hate speech is still censored on that platform. Misgendering is still something that you can get reported for on that platform. And Elon Musk still takes a hard line. He's not going to give Alex Jones his platform back. Like, so even though someone calling himself a free speech absolutist is out here saying, comedy is legal on this platform, blah, blah, blah.
But Alex Jones
it's
isn't.
Still getting unequally doled out to whoever is in Elon Musk's good graces. Yeah. So it's disheartening.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a great point. And that's one of the many reasons why people are checking out Pop Culture Crisis. Mary, thank you so much for joining the show. Of course, you can hear Pop Culture Crisis, available daily, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. Or sometimes what I do is I check out the podcast, and you can hear that on what your favorite audio platform happens to be. But Mary, keep making pop culture smarter. Keep fighting for free speech. I know it's complicated. I know it's thorny, but we need it. And we also need great shows like Pop Culture Crisis. So congratulations on it. And I will be seeing you soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to see you soon and have you on the show.
Before we go, I'd like to share a quick review of the latest summer blockbuster, Meg 2: The Trench. First, it stars Jason Statham, who is 56, but he looks about 35. Was that movie magic? Who knows? The dude is not aging. Amazing. But more importantly, if you thought that the Meg was lightweight and breezy, the sequel practically drifts off the screen like so much fog. It's amazing. And the dialogue, it hurts. It hurts so badly. Cover your ears. Here comes another line. It's just clunky as heck. And then it stops even trying to make sense. And it goes, I'd say, the full Sharknado. It's silly. It's crazy. It's off the wall. But it's funny. And it's fast. And it's better. It's so much better. The last 30 minutes were an absolute blast. They were inspired. They were outrageous. Of course, nothing connected to logic or reason, but who cares? I'm betting you're going to have the same silly grin that I had on my face when you watch it. It is a lot of fun, but of course you have to suffer through some pretty bad filmmaking to get there. So if that sounds appealing, and I bet you it does for a lot of people, it does for me, go see Meg 2: The Trench. It could be the year's worst movie until it becomes the year's guiltiest pleasure. And that is as mixed a recommendation as I can offer, but I have no regrets for seeing it. Well, that's it for the show. Thank you to Radio America, as always, for having me as part of their very great podcast lineup. And while I have your ear, I hope you'll drop by HollywoodInToto.com. It's updated 7 days a week, and it gives you the scoop on what's woke and what's worth your hard-earned dollars. See you next time.